Nadia was 27 years old the morning she realized she had spent her entire life making herself smaller so that others could feel bigger. She stood in the kitchen of the house she had grown up in, holding a cup of tea she had made for herself, and she thought, I have been doing this for so long that I do not even know what the normal size of me is. The house was quiet. It was always quiet in the mornings, the way a field is quiet just before a storm. She had learned to read that kind of quiet. She had learned to read everything. She had grown up in a family that looked, from the outside, like a normal one. Her mother cooked. Her father worked. Her two brothers played football in the yard and argued over the television remote. They went to weddings together. They took photographs at Eid. If you looked at those photographs, you would have seen a family smiling. You would not have seen what was underneath the smiling. You never do, with families like this. What was underneath was this: Nadia did not belong to herself. She belonged to the family's needs, the family's image, the family's comfort. When she wanted to study further, she was told that a degree was not necessary for a girl who would one day have a husband to provide for her. When she saved money from the small work she did at a local office, her mother would find a reason for that money to go elsewhere. When she spoke too loudly, someone would remind her of her place. It was always said gently. That was the worst part. The cruelty was always wrapped in a gentle voice. She had tried, for a long time, to believe that this was love. She had read books that told her love was complicated. She had heard people say that family does not always know how to show love in the right way. She held onto those ideas the way you hold onto a rope above water. But the morning she found out the truth, the rope snapped. And she fell. The truth arrived in an ordinary envelope. It was a letter from a man her family had been speaking to for months without telling her. They had been arranging her marriage to someone she had never met, someone who lived in another city, someone chosen not for her happiness but for the business connection he represented. Her uncle's company. Her father's debt. Her life, folded into a transaction. She read the letter 3 times. Then she walked to her mother and held it up. Her mother looked at it and said, simply, "We were going to tell you." As if the timing was the problem. As if that was where the error was. The argument that followed was the loudest thing that had ever happened in that quiet house. Her brother said she was being selfish. Her father said she was embarrassing the family. Her mother cried, which was its own kind of pressure. And Nadia stood in the middle of it all and felt something shift inside her, like a door that had been locked for years finally opening just enough for her to see through to the other side. She did not shout back. She did not cry. She looked at each of them, one by one, and then she walked to her room, packed a bag, and left. She did not know where she was going. She had enough money for a week, maybe less. She had a phone, a few clothes, and a brain that had spent 27 years learning how to survive people. She figured that last thing might be the most useful. The city outside the house looked the same as it always had. Traffic. Dust. The smell of food from a cart on the corner. But something about it felt different to her now, because she was different. She was seeing it without the filter of the family story about who she was and what she was allowed to want. And what she saw, when she looked carefully, frightened her. The people in the city were moving, but many of them were not really alive in the way she wanted to be alive. They were following patterns. Doing what they were told. Going to jobs they did not like, coming home to people who did not see them, waking up the next morning to do it all again. She recognized this because she had been one of them. The difference was that she had been forced into her pattern by her family. These people had chosen theirs. Or perhaps they had never been offered a different choice either. She could not tell. That made her sad for a moment. Then she kept walking. She called a woman named Hira, someone she had worked with briefly 2 years before. Hira was not a close friend, but she was the kind of person who did not ask too many questions and always seemed to know practical things, like where to find a cheap room or how to negotiate a difficult situation. Nadia explained, briefly, what had happened. Hira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know a place. It is not comfortable, but it is safe and no one will bother you there." Nadia said yes before Hira even finished the sentence. The place was a small room above a tailor's shop in an older part of the city. The walls were thin. The window looked out onto a narrow lane where cats walked silently at night. The bed was narrow. But the lock on the door was hers. That was the important thing. The lock on the door was hers, and no one else had the key. The first week was the hardest she had ever lived. Not because of the discomfort. She was used to discomfort. It was the silence that was difficult, because this silence was different from the silence in her family's house. That silence had always been full of things unsaid, of pressure building, of someone watching her to see if she would make a mistake. This silence was just silence. Empty and open. She did not know what to do with it at first. She sat in it like a person sitting in a room they have never been in before, not yet sure if it is a good room or a bad one. Her phone rang often that first week. Her mother. Her brothers. A cousin who had been sent as a messenger. She let most of the calls go unanswered. The ones she did pick up were short. She said she was fine. She said she needed time. She said she would talk to them soon. That last one was not entirely true, but she said it to stop them from coming to find her, because she was not ready to be found. She began to look for work. This was not easy. She had skills, but her experience on paper was thin, because her family had always found quiet ways to limit how much she could do outside the house. She applied for office work, for data entry, for anything that paid. She was rejected several times. She sat with those rejections in her small room and she felt, honestly, like giving up. She thought about going back. She thought about it very seriously. The thought was warm and familiar, the way a fire is warm, right up until it burns you. What saved her, in that moment, was not courage. She would tell you this herself if you asked her. She did not feel brave. She felt tired and scared and small. What saved her was a memory. She remembered the letter in the envelope. She remembered her mother's face when she held it up. The expression there was not guilt. It was not surprise. It was a very calm, very practiced look that said, yes, we did this, and we believed we had the right to. That memory cooled the warmth of the idea of going back, very quickly and very completely. She got a job 3 weeks after she left home. It was not a good job by most people's standards. It was at a small printing shop, helping to manage orders and write out receipts and occasionally answer the phone. The pay was very little. But the man who ran the shop was a quiet, honest man who had no interest in her personal life and no opinions about what she should do with it. He told her what the work was, paid her what he promised, and left her alone to do it. After 27 years, being left alone to do work felt like a luxury she had not known she needed. The city began to reveal itself to her in a different way during those weeks. She started to notice things she had never had time to notice before, because before, her attention had always been occupied by managing the feelings of the people around her. Now she saw the old man who sold newspapers on the corner and always said good morning to everyone, whether they responded or not. She saw the young woman who worked at the bakery next to the printing shop and who read a book during every break, completely absorbed, completely at peace. She saw the street dogs who had built their own careful social world in the lane behind the market. She began to understand that the city was full of quiet, parallel lives, each one with its own logic and its own dignity. She also began to notice the darker things. The places where the city systems did not work. The women at the government office who were told to come back tomorrow, again and again, until they stopped coming. The families in the older buildings whose electricity was cut without notice and restored only after someone paid someone something that was not exactly a bill. The young men who worked at the construction site across from the printing shop, who started at dawn and finished after dark and ate their lunch sitting on the ground because there was nowhere else for them to sit. The city had beautiful parts and terrible parts, and she began to see that the people who lived in the terrible parts were often the most skilled at surviving them. She respected that. She was becoming one of them. 2 months after she left, her family made a move she had not expected. They did not come to find her. They went around her instead. Her mother called the wife of a man Nadia had once briefly spoken about in a positive way, a colleague from her old office, and told this woman a version of events that made Nadia sound unstable, unreliable, difficult to trust. The story spread in the way such stories do, quietly and efficiently, through a network of women who all knew each other and who all shared information the way water shares itself between connected pools. Nadia found out about it when Hira mentioned, carefully, that she had heard something. Nadia did not cry. She sat with it. Then she nodded slowly and said, "Okay. Now I know what I am dealing with." That moment was, she would later understand, the moment she stopped being afraid. Not because the threat was gone. It was not gone. It was just that she could see it clearly now. And a threat you can see clearly is different from a threat that lives in the dark corners of a house you cannot leave. This one was out in the open. She had learned her whole life to watch for things in the open. This, she knew how to handle. She started to build, slowly and deliberately, a different kind of life. She took on extra work in the evenings, helping a woman who ran a small tutoring service to organize her accounts and write lesson materials. She was good at this. Her mind was orderly and her writing was clear, and the woman was pleased with her and paid her a little more each month. She moved from the room above the tailor's shop to a slightly larger room in a building with better light. She bought a plant for the windowsill. The plant was small and not particularly impressive, but she watered it every morning, and it grew. She made one friend, a real one. Her name was Saman. They met at the tutoring center, where Saman volunteered on weekends to help older women learn to read. Saman was loud where Nadia was quiet, and direct where Nadia was careful, and the two of them got along the way mismatched things sometimes do, by complementing each other's edges. Saman did not know the full story of Nadia's family, but she knew enough. She knew that Nadia was someone who had been told too many times that she was not enough. She responded to this knowledge by treating Nadia as though she were more than enough, consistently and without comment. That was a kindness Nadia did not know how to receive at first. She practiced. The city's difficult parts did not stop being difficult. She was not living a comfortable life. There were months where money was tight and the future looked very uncertain, and she lay awake some nights running numbers in her head and finding that they did not quite add up. There were days when loneliness came over her like weather, sudden and heavy, and she missed things she had not expected to miss: the smell of her mother's cooking, the sound of her brothers arguing, the specific quality of afternoon light through the curtains of her old room. She allowed herself to feel these things. She did not pretend they were not real. But she also did not let them make her decisions for her. Her family tried to contact her twice more. The first time was through her brother, who sent a message saying that things had changed and that the situation with the marriage had been resolved and that she could come home. She read the message several times, looking for what was underneath it, the way she had always looked for what was underneath things. What she found was that the message said nothing about her. It said the situation had changed. It did not say they understood what they had done. It did not say they were sorry. It did not say they had considered, for even a moment, what it had cost her. She did not reply. The second time was her mother, who called and cried for several minutes before saying anything comprehensible. When the words came, they were, "You have broken this family." Nadia held the phone and looked at the wall of her room and thought about all the years she had worked to hold that family together, all the things she had given up, all the ways she had bent herself to keep the peace. She thought about the envelope. She thought about the letter inside it. Then she said, gently and clearly, "I did not break it, Mama. I just stopped hiding the cracks." She said goodbye and she put the phone down. Her hands were not shaking. She was surprised by that, and then she was not. 8 months after she left, something changed that she had not planned for. The owner of the printing shop, whose name was Mr. Farouk, asked her to manage the shop's small social media presence and to write content for the orders they sent out. He had noticed that her writing was careful and clear and that the customers responded well to her. He offered her a raise and a new title. She accepted. She stayed late that evening to begin the new work, sitting alone in the quiet shop after it had closed, the blue light of the screen on her face, and she felt something she recognized only slowly. She felt capable. Not as a performance. Not for someone else. Just quietly, privately, genuinely capable. By the end of the first year, her life was still not easy. She was not going to pretend it was. The money was better but not comfortable. The loneliness came and went. There were still moments of grief for the family she had needed and never quite had. But she had a room that was hers, a plant that was growing, a friend who told her the truth, a job that used her mind, and the very particular satisfaction of knowing that every single good thing in her life had been built by her own hands. One evening near the end of that year, she was walking home from the printing shop when she passed a young woman sitting on the steps of a building. The woman was young, maybe 20 or 21, and she was holding a bag on her lap with both hands, and she was looking at the street with the expression of someone who does not know yet where they are going. Nadia recognized that expression. She had worn it herself. She stopped. She asked the woman if she was all right. The woman looked up at her, and what Nadia saw in her face was fear and pride, the particular combination of someone who needs help but has been taught that needing help is a weakness. Nadia did not ask further questions. She sat down on the step beside the woman and she said, in a simple and quiet voice, "I know someone who has a room to let that is safe and not expensive. I know where you can find work that will not treat you badly. And I know that it is very hard right now, and that it does not feel like it will get better, but it does get better. Not quickly and not easily, but it does." The woman looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "How do you know?" And Nadia said, "Because I was sitting on a step like this one, not so long ago." She walked home that night under a sky that was deep blue and wide, the kind of sky the city did not often show you because of the dust and the lights, but that appeared sometimes, without warning, like a reminder. She put her key in her door. She turned on the lamp. She watered the plant on the windowsill, which had grown considerably and was, at this point, making a genuine effort to take over the ledge. She made tea. She sat down. She was tired. She was also, in a way she had not been taught to be and had learned entirely on her own, content. She had survived the people who should have protected her. She had walked into the parts of the city that frightened others and found, inside them, everything she needed to build a life that was actually hers. She had not done it by becoming hard. She had done it by becoming honest, patient, and very, very careful about what she allowed to stay close to her. The shadows had not swallowed her. She had learned their language. And that had made all the difference. End.